Thank you to Master Sergeant Laura Reagan for her impeccable organization and professionalism in planning and coordinating this program. I don't know how many emails our office got from your office to ensure that we would be here, and it almost failed because yesterday, all day, I thought it was Wednesday. So I thought the day was Thursday, and when I woke up this morning and realized it was Friday, I realized I needed to get moving. So fortunately, I stayed in Tampa last night, and I wasn't far. And by the way, if you ever see a white SUV going down I-4, that's my car, just so you know. My friend Velma Glover, deputy here at the Sheriff's Department, and one of my biggest fans and supporters, Corporal Jesse Warren and Tina Apolloni, for all of your help in coordinating my appearance here. I'd also like to thank the law enforcement officers who are present. From my perspective, I see the work that you do, and I see the danger that you put your lives in every day to support and help our community. And it is no small effort. I mean, they look really nice now, all dressed up, ironed. When I see them, they're haggard and tired and often been through a lot. And I really appreciate it from the Tampa Police Department, the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, and now even from North Carolina. Thank you for your service. Thank you to Sheriff G and to Commissioner Kasser in their absence today. There's so much negative press going on in the world. People traveling from far distances to go see a murder trial and sitting up all night to be first in line, that it's really kind of sad that what we're doing here isn't the real front page news, because it really is the best thing that's happening in our community when we see young people who are making a difference, who are meeting the expectations of society and meeting the expectations of their parents. That's what we should have as our front page news. So I laud you as law enforcement for recognizing the efforts of these students who often go unnoticed unless they're in trouble. So thank you very much for your service in that regard. It didn't require much persuasion to get me to come here, because anytime I can see kids dressed up in something other than orange jumpsuits and ankle bracelets, it's really something for me to see. Ms. Reagan, Master Sergeant Reagan, gave me a script, by the way, and she told me I was supposed to be here for 10 to 15 minutes, but what she didn't tell you in her introduction is that I am the daughter of a Baptist preacher, the granddaughter of a Baptist preacher, daughter-in-law of a Baptist preacher, and a niece of a Baptist preacher, a couple of them. So anybody who wants to volunteer to turn the lights out when I finish, let me know. It reminds me, my dad tells the story about these two kids that were sitting in the back seat of their preacher daddy's car on the way to another revival, and one of them was Malcolm and one of them was Martin, and he says to them, "Well, guys, what do you want me to preach about?" And the other Malcolm, Martin, the polite one, says, "Dad, I want you to preach that sermon about the dry bones and the connecting to the dry bones. That's what I like." And he said, "Okay." And he says, "Well, Malcolm, what do you want me to preach about?" And he said, "Dad, I want you to preach about 10 minutes and then sit down." So I'll take the Malcolm approach and the Laura Reagan approach. I see my role here as one to encourage young people to think big, look beyond the obvious to the possibilities. One of my favorite fortune cookies is anything great that was ever accomplished was once thought impossible. And think about all the things that you know that are great that people would have said, "That's not possible, you're wasting your time, you can't do that." That's what you all are here to do what was once thought impossible. And I'll tell you that the theme that I have chosen is get into your treehouse. And that may seem odd to you, but I have a daughter, her name is Jessica, and she's built a lot like her mother, kind of bottom heavy, And she went to a Montessori school once, and at the Montessori school they had a treehouse. The only problem was it wasn't ADA compliant. And so she couldn't get into this treehouse because the only access was through a rope. And of course her mother litigator wanted to litigate because I thought they should have some steps for those who are bottom challenged, but that didn't mean anything to the Montessori people. So every day I would see Jessica go up to this treehouse and see her skinny little friends just take the rope and get to the top of it. And I felt discouraged for her, and she felt discouraged. And my husband says, "Well, you can't help her in the treehouse. It's her thing. Leave it alone. Let her do her thing." And that's often hard for a mother to watch, watching your children fail and watch them struggle. But I eventually gave in to his advice and let her do that. And I'll tell you about that in a minute. But it encourages me in 3 respects that I'd like to share with you. 4 respects. 3 don'ts and 1 do. That's what I want to leave you with. 3 don'ts and 1 do in your effort to get into your treehouse. First, don't let your past dictate your future. A lot of us do that. You know, you hear about Judge Scriven and Duke and Florida State and first African American this and that and the other thing. But what people don't tell you when they introduce me is about my failures and about my regular stuff. I have regular crazy kids, ask Velma. I have regular dog problems. My dog jumped out of his car and broke his arm and broke his back leg. I lost my nail this morning. I had to paint it over with bad nail polish. I'm a regular person. I grew up in Macon, Georgia. It's really not even Macon, Georgia. That's probably a fib on my resume. I grew up in Lizella, Georgia, which is a booming suburb of Macon, Georgia. And my dad's a preacher. My mom was a nurse. I went to public school. My first guidance counselor, when I went to apply to go to Duke, told me, don't even bother. You'll never get into that school. And if you do, it's only because you're black and you will fail. Of course, I applied anyway. I got in. And so I want to take her a little note back. I never did that. I encountered my first revolving door when I went for my interview for a job after law school. So I'm 26 years old, 25 years old. The first time I've ever seen a revolving door. If you've never been in a revolving door, go to one before you go to your first interview. Because when I got to the revolving door, it was in a big building in Atlanta at the firm of Kilpatrick and Cody, and I got into the same little triangle as the lady who was escorting me. It only lasted 10 seconds, but it was a really long 10 seconds where we were going through the door like this. And of course, I didn't get that job. That goes without saying. So everyone talks about my accomplishments, but they don't talk about my failures. They don't talk about the fact that I tried to become a magistrate judge twice before I was appointed. They don't tell you about I became a district judge on my third try. Now, you all don't know what that means, but to be a district judge, you have to go through a committee. The committee has to select you. You have to be interviewed by the senators of your state. Then they have to nominate you. Then you have to go to Washington to be interviewed, and then they have to pick you. Imagine going to Washington with all of your colleagues and your friends watching, all the celebration and the wine bottles ready to pop off and coming back empty-handed. I mean, you feel embarrassed, you feel stupid, you feel unworthy. But the goal and the lesson in all of that is that no matter what happens, don't let anyone turn you back. I mean, you can always do what you have set your mind to do if you don't allow fear and discouragement to stop you. People say that faith is the absence of fear. And I believe that faith is the presence of courage in the face of fear and failure. And that's what you will have to learn as you grow up. It won't always be easy. It won't always be fun. It won't always be pleasant. But your goal ultimately is to do what you have been gifted to do. In the infamous words of Pumbaa, one of my favorite philosophers, you got to put your behind in your past. Don't let anyone turn you around is the second don't. People will try to turn you around. When I went to Washington for my second interview, I didn't even make it to Washington the first time, but when I went to Washington for my second interview, I was dressed to the nines. I had this beautiful wool coat, this fly black suit, nice shoes. I was looking good. If I didn't get it, I was going to be looking good when I came home. And I got to the White House gate, and the lady said, "I'm sorry, ma'am, this is the entrance to the West Wing. You'll have to go around to the visitor's entrance." And I said, "No, actually, I'm here to go through the West Wing." And people will look at you and they'll make assumptions about you, about your place in society and where you belong. And on those assumptions, they'll turn you back. And you have to have the courage to stand up to them and say, "No, this is where I belong. This is what I intend to do. And there's nothing you can do to keep me from the goals and the dreams that I set for myself." Some of us are turned around by our own egos. You know, there are some of you who think you have such a great idea and such a great notion about what you're going to do that you're not going to do anything until you get the shot at that one thing. Anybody play Scrabble in here? You know, if you get a 7-letter word and you play it, you can almost bet you're going to win the game because you get extra bonus points, like 150 extra bonus points. So one day my brother was playing Scrabble, and on the very first pull of the letters, he got a 7-letter word. So he sat the entire game and passed every time, hoping to play that 7-letter word. And there was never a combination of letters on the board that permitted it. Don't allow yourself to be frozen in inertia, waiting for that one great thing to do. Do the good things that you can do. Do the simple things that you can do to make a difference around you. Because you may not have that opportunity to do that thing that society believes is great. You may have to do a good thing. And that takes me to my third don't. Don't let anyone sell your talent short. Whatever your talent is, do it, and do it to the best of your ability. Whether you want to be a dog trainer, or whether you want to be a barber, or whether you want to be a doctor or a neurosurgeon, whatever you want to be, don't let anyone sell your talent short. Whatever God-inspired talents you were given, it was given to you for a reason. And so let me tell you about a guy named Joseph. He was a dam maintenance man. I don't mean dam in the bad sense, actually a dam like the Hoover Dam. It seems at some point, his job title was simply maintenance worker. No big title like sheriff or deputy sheriff or super deputy sheriff or flying off the handle deputy sheriff. His principal job function was to show up every day, check the water pressures and valves, oil them when he could, to keep the dam down at its proper levels. Nothing too complicated. And after 30 years of dutiful and unnoticed service, he took his retirement and rode off into the sunset with very little fanfare. In fact, due to budget cuts, he wasn't even replaced because nobody really knew what it was he was doing down there anyway, so why do we need a Joseph replacement? But a year or so went by and someone noticed that the water pressure valves in the dam were giving cautionary notices. It seems the water was rising at an alarming rate. After a special commission was impaneled, because that's the first thing we do, we got to study the problem, to no avail, they called in the Army Corps of Engineers. No help there. They called in specialists, private engineers, still no help. No one could seem to fix the problem. Worse, it seemed that if the problem was not resolved shortly, in a matter of days, the dam would likely burst, causing loss of lives and millions of dollars in property damage. Word finally got to old Joseph about what was going on. And so he called his old chief and offered to consult on the project. Out of desperation, the chief said, okay, whatever, come on. After all, what could it hurt? So Joseph said, well, what am I going to get paid? So the chief said, well, if you can fix this problem, we'll pay you anything. So Joseph flew back into town, got his old tool belt, descended into the bowels of the dam. He was all but ignored by the frantic engineers and analyzing, evaluating, and hypothesizing. He took out his 3/4-inch screwdriver, reached behind one of the large tanks, and to the absolute astonishment and relief of everyone, turned a couple of screws, and the dam's water began to recede rapidly. The water pressure readings began retreating to normal positions. In all the jubilation, the chief did not see the bill Joseph left on his desk the next day. When he finally did take a look at it, he immediately got on the phone to Joseph. What do you mean you want to be paid $500,000 for turning a couple of screws? When you worked here, you were only at a grade 13 and your salary was $32,000. Joseph waited patiently for the tirade to end, and then he explained calmly, yes, Mon, when I work for you, you pay me to turn the screw. That's worth $1,000 with airfare. Now, you pay me for knowing what screw to turn. That has cost you $499,000. The moral of that story is that you have to bloom where you're planted. What knowledge you were given, the skills you were given, the talent you were given is not for you to hold back and not give to others. It's for you to use to the best of your ability. If you do what you love, the money will come. And if the money doesn't come, the service will be enough. Parents and mentors, let me leave a couple of notes to you as well, because we tell kids all this stuff all the time, but we rarely lead by example. Do the right thing. Don't go in bad places. Do what you're supposed to do. And it reminds me of my little daughter. She was sitting in the back seat of my car one day, as they were back then. I was driving down Kennedy to go to the mall. Any of you know where 7 Seas is? Have you ever seen the sign at 7 Seas? It's sort of a silhouette of a scantily clad at best lady, and she's on the wall in her pose. And my daughter says, well, what is that? Knowing full well what it was. And they'd asked me several times what it was, and I refused to answer. So finally, in frustration, I said, it's a horrible, terrible place where women go to dance naked for men, and I don't ever want to see you there. It's horrible. And she looked over there, and she looked back at me, and she says, well, there sure are a lot of cars in the parking lot. And to that notion, I tell you to check where your car is parked. When you give your children advice about what they should do, about how they should excel, all of you have aspirations that you haven't met. I don't know what those aspirations are, whether it's to go back to school, whether it's to study a gift that you have, whether it's to work on a hobby, whether it's to work on your health. All of you have aspirations. And when you're telling your children what to do, they're looking back to see what you're doing about all the things that you're telling them are the right things to do. And so finally, I'll leave you with the only do. Do believe in yourself. I told you about my story about Jessica. One day an envelope came in the mail after the whole summer camp was over. And there was Jessica standing with the broadest smile anyone could imagine across her face, standing in the top of the treehouse. Because what she had learned through her own hard work and her own perseverance was that you really can do anything you set your mind to. And that there's no single more wonderful feeling than to know that you've accomplished what you set out to do on your own terms, in your own times, through your own efforts. Every person must make that decision for themselves. There is nothing your parents can do, nothing all these law enforcement officers can do. And by the way, you'll never be surrounded by these many officers except in a good circumstance. So this is the last time you're going to see these many police officers when it's a good thing. Some of you feel you can't do it because you can't see yourself. Anybody out here with aspirations in law? Come up here. I grew up in Macon, Georgia, and the judges in Macon, come on, don't look back at your friends. The judges in Macon, Georgia rarely got out, at least in my circles. And so I never could imagine that I could be a judge until one day I was about to graduate from law school, and the chief judge of the 11th Circuit was sitting in Tallahassee, and he invited me up to his office. And I didn't really have a sense of what that meant and how big a deal that was, and so he went to go do something, and I went and sat in his chair. And he came back and thought, what is this woman doing sitting in my chair? But it was an inspirational feeling for me, because once you see yourself in a role, you can conceive it as something you can really do. So I'm going to let you be Judge Scriven for a moment and put on this robe. What's your name?
Luis.
Huh?
Luis.
Luis what?
Vasquez.
Judge Vasquez. Zip your own stop now. Okay, first thing he's got to learn is how to work a zipper. Then we'll let him go to law school. You got it that part. If a little black girl from Macon, Georgia can be a federal judge, Mr. Luis Vasquez, with all the support of this community, these law enforcement officers, his family and friends, has no challenge at all in front of him. Order in the court, sir. Hit it like you mean it.